The weight of the house felt heavier than ever as Tiffany walked in, her heels clicking against the cold marble floor like a countdown. The air around us felt suffocating, and I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, louder than the silence between us. I hadn't even finished mourning Marcus before she showed up, but here she was, so cold, so calculated. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Trust me, stories like this happen more often than you think. Her eyes flickered over the space, like she was assessing property, not grieving with me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a house. This was about control. She had a plan, and I was only just beginning to see it. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I couldn't breathe. The weight of my son's death pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. And yet there I was, standing in his beautiful home, supposed to be mourning the loss of the person who had meant everything to me. But instead, I was confronted by someone I never thought would hurt me. Tiffany. She stood there, as cold as the walls of the house Marcus had bought for me, the house he had gifted me 3 months before his accident. She wasn't here to mourn. No, Tiffany wasn't grieving. Instead, she was here with a smile that barely reached her eyes, holding a set of keys in her hand as though she was handing me a mere trinket. "You need to leave," she said. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "This house is mine now." I couldn't comprehend it at first. It took a moment to register. Her words sliced through me, the final blow after everything I had just endured. My own son was gone, and now this woman, his wife, was taking what he had left me, his final gift. Her greed was obvious, her intentions clear. I stood there, feeling the ground beneath me shift. The house that had been my sanctuary, that my son had lovingly handed over to me, was no longer mine. It was hers, and I had no idea how to fight back. I wanted to scream, but instead, all I could do was stand there, stunned, in the place where I thought I would find peace. I had to find my strength. I had to. I remember the long nights when I worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, the sacrifices I made without ever hesitating, because all I wanted was for Marcus to have a better life than I did. I sold off pieces of my own dreams so he could chase his. Every day, I pushed through exhaustion, thinking of his future. I thought about the way I taught him to hold his head high, the way he'd look at me after a long day with a tired but proud smile. The boy I raised, the boy I fought for, had become a man of promise. And then, after all those years of struggling, of hoping for something better for him, he made it. I had never seen his eyes light up the way they did the day he told me his tech startup had been bought for millions. That moment, those tears he held back, was the kind of joy I had dreamed of for him. I had always told him he'd make it, but even then, I never expected it would come with such a price. The sudden wealth changed things, not just for him, but for us. I could see the shift in his demeanor, the way he became more distant as his life took off. He was still my son, but he was also someone else now, a man I didn't entirely recognize. Still, I was proud. He had worked so hard for this, but I had no idea how much the weight of it would affect him. When Marcus died, a part of me felt like I'd lost not just a son, but the dream we had built together. And now, with what was to come, I couldn't even begin to comprehend the betrayal that awaited me. I couldn't believe my eyes when Tiffany walked through the door. She wasn't the grieving widow I expected to see, wrapped in sorrow. No, she was practically glowing, her designer sunglasses still perched on her nose, like she was strolling through a shopping mall, not standing in the house where her husband had just been laid to rest. Behind her stood Rick, A man I didn't recognize but who seemed oddly familiar, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. 2. They didn't even give me a chance to speak before Tiffany breezed past me into the house, as though she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the floor, cutting through the stillness that should have been filled with mourning. The flowers from Marcus's funeral hadn't even wilted yet, and here she was, acting as if nothing had happened, as if Marcus had never existed. The stranger behind her, Rick, stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. There was something about him that felt off. His smirk didn't belong in a room where a man's body had only just been buried. He had the look of someone who was too comfortable in this house, someone who'd been here before. Tiffany, on the other hand, was moving through the house with a detached air, almost like she was redecorating, not mourning. "We're going to make some changes around here," she said, her voice casual, as though we were discussing renovations and not the life of my son. My chest tightened as I watched her, my mind racing with confusion and growing discomfort. I had just buried my son, and yet this woman, his wife, was treating his death like an inconvenience. I felt like an outsider in my own home. The house Marcus had bought me, the one he'd proudly handed over with tears in his eyes, was now just another asset to her. I couldn't place the feeling, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. This wasn't grief. It was something else, something cold, something I wasn't prepared for. And as I stood there, watching her take control, a new thought began to form in my mind. This wasn't just about the house. There was more to this. Much more. Tiffany's words hit me like a slap in the face, and for a moment, I couldn't catch my breath. She stood there, looking so composed, so in control, and all I could do was stare. She started talking about Marcus, as if she knew him better than I ever did. Marcus was planning to contest that house gift, she said, her voice steady, almost detached. He always thought it was a mistake. He'd tell me how he was manipulated into giving it to you when he was vulnerable after his promotion. Her words sank into me, and my chest tightened. I couldn't understand. Marcus had given me that house with so much love, so much pride. I remembered the tears in his eyes when he handed me the keys. He wanted to give me everything, the house, the life he never thought he'd have. But Tiffany was telling me it was all a lie, that somehow I had twisted his arm into it. I felt the ground beneath me shift. The air in the room grew heavier. She wasn't here to mourn him. She wasn't here to grieve. She was here to take what Marcus had given me, and she was doing it with such cold efficiency. "See, I'm handling it now," Tiffany continued, as if we were talking about a trivial matter. Marcus never really understood, but I do. I know what's best for all of us. I could feel my hands shake as I gripped the edge of the counter, my mind reeling. I thought I'd known Tiffany, but this woman, this version of her, was unrecognizable. All those years of smiling, pretending to be the perfect wife, it was all a performance. And now, she was trying to erase everything Marcus had done for me. The betrayal was suffocating. She wasn't just taking the house, she was taking my son's memory, his generosity, and twisting it into something ugly. I had been so blind to her true nature, and now I had to face it. What had I missed? Had all of this been part of her plan all along? The question swirled in my head as I stood there, stunned, unable to breathe. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go. I wouldn't. I had spent 35 years teaching teenagers how to think critically, how to ask questions, and how to piece together information when everything seemed too tangled to understand. I had spent my life guiding them to challenge what they were told, to look beyond the surface and trust their instincts. But here I was, standing in my own home, feeling lost and betrayed, unable to process the weight of it all. I couldn't let myself stay this way. I couldn't let Tiffany and Rick rewrite the story of Marcus's life and death without fighting back. I had spent years teaching kids to think for themselves, and now it was time for me to take my own advice. It was time to dig deeper. I remembered how, in my classroom, I taught my students to break down problems into smaller, manageable pieces. Every detail mattered, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Observation, patience, deductive reasoning. Those were my tools now. I started to focus, gathering every scrap of information I had about Marcus's life leading up to that fatal accident. The way he had been acting in the weeks before his death kept circling in my mind. He'd been distracted, a little on edge. He'd been distant. Yes, but I told myself it was just stress from his newfound wealth. Now, though, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. Something about the whole situation didn't add up. I couldn't believe that Tiffany was right, that Marcus had been planning to take the house from me. That wasn't the son I knew. I had to be missing something. And that's when it hit me. I had to investigate. I had been taught to trust my intuition, and right now, my instincts were telling me that this wasn't just about a house. It was about something much bigger. And I was going to uncover the truth. I had no experience with crime or investigation, but I knew how to ask questions. I knew how to look for what wasn't being said. It was time to seek help. It was time to take action. I sat in my son's favorite chair, staring at the cold cup of coffee I had barely touched. The house was silent except for the occasional rustle of papers or the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. It had been days since the accident, but the weight of Marcus's death still sat heavily in my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see his face, his eyes full of excitement when he told me about the house. I remembered his words so clearly. "Mom, this is for you. You've earned it." But as much as I wanted to believe it was just a freak accident, something inside me was stirring. I started thinking about the crash, the way he missed a curve on a road he had driven 100 times before. Marcus was a cautious man. I could almost hear him lecturing me about wearing seatbelts and driving safely. That wasn't like him. He wouldn't have been reckless enough to crash into that tree. I thought about the police report I had gone over several times. They said there were no skid marks. How could that be? Marcus was a meticulous driver. He was always so careful, always in control. The report also mentioned the small cut on his forehead, no other visible injuries. They said, it didn't add up. A crash that severe should have left more than just a tiny scrape. Then there was the timing. Tiffany, so quick to mourn yet so eager to get her hands on everything, had been too calm, too calculated. Her coldness when she had shown up at the house only a day after the funeral, it had been almost as if she was ready for this moment. I thought back to how she and Rick had arrived, like they knew the exact right moment to push me aside. Was it possible they had planned this all along? Was my son's death a simple accident? Or had something darker been at play? I had been so wrapped in my grief. I hadn't asked the right questions. But now, something in my gut told me I had to find the truth. I couldn't let this go. Marcus deserved better. I owed him that much. And if Tiffany and Rick were involved in any way, I was going to uncover it, no matter what it took. I sat at Marcus' desk, the weight of the silence pressing in on me. The house felt colder now, emptier, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. My hands trembled slightly as I sifted through his personal files, papers that hadn't been touched since the day he died. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a letter, a clue, a note that would explain why my son was taken from me so suddenly. Then, as my eyes scanned the contents of a folder labeled Personal. I found it. At first, I thought it was just more paperwork, receipts, bills, nothing out of the ordinary. But one sheet caught my eye. It was a list of divorce lawyers. My heart skipped a beat. Marcus had been researching divorce lawyers. He never mentioned anything about problems in his marriage. Tiffany and Marcus, they had their issues, but nothing serious, or so I had thought. I pulled out more papers, my pulse quickening with each one I found. There were bank statements, large cash withdrawals, amounts that didn't match the lifestyle I knew Marcus to have. He'd always been careful with money, cautious even. So why these large sums? Where had the money gone? Then I found a final transfer, a massive one, just a few days before the accident. It didn't take much to realize this wasn't normal. Marcus had been preparing to leave Tiffany. He had been making plans, setting things in motion without telling anyone. The thought hit me like a wave, knocking the breath from my lungs. He had been protecting me, trying to shield me from whatever was happening behind closed doors. I felt a mix of grief and shock, but also something else, determination. My son had seen something coming, something I hadn't been able to see, and now it was up to me to find out the truth. His death wasn't an accident. It couldn't have been. I had to keep digging. I had to get to the bottom of this, for Marcus, for myself, for the truth. Whatever had happened to him, I wouldn't rest until I uncovered every detail. Tiffany and Rick. Something wasn't right about them. It was time for me to take action. I watched Rick closely, my eyes steady and unblinking. The tension in the room was palpable. Every breath felt like it could break the silence. I had him now. He didn't know it yet, but he was already cornered. He shifted uneasily, avoiding my gaze, his body language betraying his nervousness. Rick had always thought he was the one in control, confident, manipulative, untouchable. But today, he was the one on the defensive. I had pieced together the truth, and now it was time to make him face it. You know, Rick, I said, my voice cold but steady. I've been thinking a lot about Marcus, about everything that's happened, and something doesn't sit right. My words were deliberate, each one calculated to draw him in. You said the accident was just that, an accident. But I'm starting to see things differently. His jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck twitching. He tried to maintain his composure, but the cracks were starting to show. What are you talking about? Dorothy, he snapped, his voice rising. This is crazy. There's nothing more to it. I could see the fear in his eyes, and it was all I needed to keep pressing. You're wrong. Rick, I said quietly, my tone still measured. Marcus wasn't reckless. He was careful. Too careful. But something changed, and you know it. I found the research he'd done. Lawyers. Finances. He was preparing to leave Tiffany. He was trying to protect me, wasn't he? I leaned in closer, my voice dropping lower. I bet he didn't even tell you. Did he? Rick's face turned pale, the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. I knew I had him now. His defenses were crumbling. You thought you could get away with it. I continued, my words coming slower now, each one sinking deeper. But I know what happened. Rick, I know it wasn't just an accident. You did this. He took a step back, his hands shaking. You don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his voice trembling now. But the guilt was clear in his eyes, and that was all I needed. I do, I said quietly. And now you're going to tell me everything. There was a long pause. The air in the room felt heavier, like the weight of the truth was pressing down on both of us. And then, finally, he broke. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he muttered, his voice barely audible. I thought I could control it. But Marcus, he was on to us. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The truth was out. I had known it all along, but now it was real. The shock was starting to wear off, replaced with a quiet, growing determination. I had him, and now, nothing was going to stop me from getting justice for Marcus. It's done. Tiffany and Rick are facing the consequences of their actions, and though I never expected this kind of resolution, here I am. Marcus's name has been cleared, and justice has been served. The weight of everything still hangs heavy in my chest, but there's a quiet peace in knowing I've honored my son's memory. He never deserved what happened to him, but at least I made sure that the truth came out. He fought for me in the end, even if he never said it out loud. And now, I fought for him. I sit here, in the same house where I used to hear Marcus laugh, where I watched him grow into the man he became. It's a strange feeling, this closure. I thought it would feel like a final chapter, like the end of a long, hard road, but it doesn't. It feels like the beginning of something else. I've lost so much, but in fighting for Marcus, I found a strength I didn't know I had. There's a deep sadness, of course. I'll never be able to hold him again. I'll never see him walk through that door or hear him call me Mom like he used to. But I'll carry his memory with me, and I'll carry the lessons I learned from this fight. I've learned that even when everything feels impossible, there's always a way to make things right. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I know one thing for sure. This chapter is behind me, and whatever comes next, I'll face it with the same determination, the same quiet strength that brought me here. Justice has been done, and Marcus is finally at peace. I fought for Marcus, and in the end, justice was served. The pain of losing him will never fade, but knowing that I've done everything I could for him, that I've held those responsible accountable, gives me peace. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like giving up, when the grief was so overwhelming that I thought I couldn't go on. But I did. I found the strength, even when I didn't think I had any left. And now, as I sit here, I can finally breathe. The weight of the past is still heavy, but it's a different kind of weight. A weight that's not just sorrow, but also a quiet satisfaction. Marcus may no longer be with me, but his legacy lives on. Justice was done, and that brings me some comfort. I know many of you have faced your own battles, loss, betrayal, the search for truth, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever fought for justice in the face of adversity? Please, share your story in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.